Gaming variety nowadays pretty much lets players pick their flavor when it comes to dueling mage games, and Terrible Monster is just one of those flavors. However, instead of copious amounts of cards, it attempts to condense the fighting into a very small deck. In this game, players take 4 health tokens and 2 counter tokens. They then are each dealt 5 cards. On a player's turn, they draw a card, then play a card, a mechanism that's familiar with these types of microgames. Card effects will change the game to some extent, while putting monsters out in front of you will deal damage should they survive to the start of your next turn. The big bad of the game is the Terrible Monster, and it can't be played from your hand, but rather must be summoned by another card or effect. This monster can deal a one-hit kill to any opponent. However, if someone plays a card you're not keen on, players may use a counter token to prevent it from happening. If the original player still has both of their counter tokens, they can play 2 counter tokens to prevent you from countering it. Play continues until one player is out of health. Terrible Monster is a game that's going up against stiff competition. Ashes, Magic the Gathering, Mage War, Summoner Wars, BattleCon are all just the tip of the iceberg in terms of games that have you battling other Magic wielders. The big problem is that most of those games have far more depth. Granted, the entry point on those games is far higher, but you're rewarded with a much richer gaming experience. It's kind of the difference between a home-cooked turkey dinner and a 10-piece chicken nugget meal. The fighting is very back and forth. Players have to choose which attacks to counter, but those choices are often fairly obvious. What becomes the issue is that you end up with a feeling that your decisions only matter if you don't make the obviously correct one. You draw a card, look at your hand, and play the correct option. There are only a few nuances in what might be the correct choice, but the game is so short that you have little to no time to build up a defensive or an attack engine. Also, some of the rules and text on the cards can be confusing, which is not great considering how small this game is. Now, lack of depth and shallow decisions in this game have a silver lining. It's going to give you a quick taste of that ever-popular Magic dueling experience. The expansion, which I highly recommend, adds a little to the mix as well in the form of asymmetrical player powers and some extra monsters. This is a game that you can teach and play within a matter of minutes. It's easily pocket-sized and looks pretty cool. There's sort of a swamp bayou theme, and the illustrations really play into that. Ultimately, this isn't a game that even pretends to be as in-depth as the majority of other offerings in this thematic genre. It is absolutely a microgame, and as such, certain limitations are to be expected, and if those expectations are realized and it still interests you, then this might be a good choice for you. While I wasn't wowed by this game, it's an interesting little piece of the gaming world that may appeal to you. My big concern with this has to be the lack of interesting choices to make. I'm left feeling like everything is very deterministic. It was a nice way to pass some time, and maybe that's all you're looking for. If so, you may have way more fun than I did.